All right, welcome everyone. I can see we have quite a number of people logging in, so we'll just give it a few more minutes or a minute or two. But yeah, welcome to today's session. My name is Zizo Aku. I am the president for the ATD Central Florida chapter. And today we are here to witness the last session, Keith Keating, on design thinking from theory to application. We have had several sessions and it's been very insightful, and I'm really looking forward. I'm super excited and really looking forward to this session. So again, I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany, who is going to be moderating this session. And I also want to take a minute to just recognize Marcella Iannini, who is our director of programs, who's also in attendance. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Tiffany.
Thank you, Ziza. Thank you, Marcella. I wanted to share with you a little bit about my colleague, Keith Keating. So I see some familiar names. So you may remember that Keith has had a career in learning and development for over 20 years now. He is a workforce futurist. He is a design thinking practitioner, and he is a learning and development thought leader. He's currently pursuing his doctorate in the Chief Learning Officer program at the University of Pennsylvania. And in his role at GP and beyond, he partners with Fortune 500 clients, helping them tap into understanding, resolving unmet customer and employee needs. And naturally, he has a keen passion for preparing talent for the future of work. I have observed this firsthand as his colleague. I'm very, very pleased to give the floor to Keith Keating.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. I could not have said any of that better or written it better myself. So thank you everyone for joining again for part 3 of our series. We started with the future of work, and then we started with the theory of design thinking, and now it's the application design thinking. So we will have spent about 4.5 hours together, and I feel like you're part of my family now. And so for those of you that haven't been to all 3 sessions, why didn't you? Check out the recordings. They're important. Rules of the road for today. Close out of everything except for this session, please. Make sure you switch off your mobile. We will have a 5-minute break. I think we did have to skip that last time because we had so much engagement, but I'm really going to try and keep that in this time. We have a fantastic moderator today, Tiffany, who you have already met, and please participate. This is going to be an engaging, interactive session, and you may be called upon, so fair warning with that. In terms of what we're going to be talking about today, we're continuing the design thinking discussion, and we started first with theory, and now we're moving into application, and that's understanding a deeper practice, a deeper application of how design thinking is used from the use case that we'll be talking about today with General Motors. I want to start first with understanding a little bit about where you are. So this also gives you a quick practice opportunity with Zoom. So if you would either in the chat, let me know where you're located, or use the annotation tools. The annotation tool is at the very top of your screen. Click on annotate, and you can pick whatever stamp that you like and just show me where it is that you are located. And I'll lead by example. So I'm going to put a little stamp if I can find where I am. Ooh, I think I'm right here in Toronto. I see some, looks like Michigan, maybe some Arkansas, Florida. I know we've got more of an international crew here. Tiffany, what do we have in the chat?
We have some Orlando, a couple Orlando. We have India. We have Boise, Idaho. Another Orlando. Dubai, ooh, and Michigan.
Wow.
Another Orlando as well, Elizabeth. Great. Nice
well,
crowd.
I would expect a lot of Orlando, given that it is the Orlando chapter. I see France as well. Excellent.
Nice.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I'm glad to have you all here today, especially for those overseas where the time zone may not be that comfortable for you. So I appreciate that. Let me move on. Tiffany, if you could. Thank you. All right, so another quick question for you. What's your level of experience with design thinking? So I know a number of you are recurring members and you've attended the other sessions, but some of you may be new. So in the chat, if you'll just please put a number 1 through 5, 1 meaning this is the first time you're hearing about design thinking, and 5, you're an expert and you hope that I could teach you something new. That way I just get a general idea of your expertise, your comfort level with design thinking.
You've got a couple of threes,
So I
Keith.
see,
Quite a few. Yeah, got some
okay.
fours.
Xylene, which I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The first sessions are recorded, so you can go back and check those out at any time. And for those of you that didn't attend the first sessions, it's okay. This is not a consecutive sequence necessarily. You didn't have to attend those to understand today. Today's focus is really about how design thinking gets applied. I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step use case at General Motors of that. So they do build on each other, but they're not consecutive, so you won't be lost, promise. All right, so we'll start with just a quick high-level overview of design thinking. This will take maybe 3 minutes because I want to make sure everybody has the same foundation. So what is design thinking? It's a set of principles for creative problem solving. It's a methodology that asks us to take a step back from the problem that's in front of us and think about the human on the other end of that problem. Because all too often we get a problem in front of us and we immediately want to start brainstorming and solutioning that problem without figuring out, is this the right problem that we should be solving? What is the actual need, the actual challenge that the human is having on the other end, and learn from them rather from someone else. So a set of principles for creative problem solving, the most basic foundation. It helps us lead to human-centered products, services, and internal processes. And one of my favorite outputs is that it helps to unlock the needs of our users, even when they don't know what they are or they aren't able to articulate them correctly, which is often the problem that I find as a lifelong consultant. Someone will think this is the problem, or they're told this is the problem, that's what they're repeating, and actually the problem was something else. So design thinking gives us the tools and the methodologies to backtrack and uncover that root cause analysis. So as a reminder, design thinking is a focus on people. There are 5 phases in design thinking: empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So we start with empathy, where we learn about the audience. We don't start with the problem like you do in a lot of other problem-solving methodologies. We start first with problem finding, and we do that through empathy research. Once we've gone out and we've learned from our users, typically in our case, it's our learners or our employees, then we synthesize all of that data, we analyze it, and we define the problem statement based on what we've just learned. Then we move forward with brainstorming, coming up with all these great ideas. We narrow them down to prototypes, and then of course we test them to find the right idea to then move forward with to solve that problem. So it looks like design thinking might be linear, but it's not. It's a non-linear iterative process, which means any one of these phases can be happening at the same time. And for me, empathy should be happening throughout. We don't just start with empathy at the beginning and then never speak to our learners again. We should actually, or our users, we should keep them engaged throughout the entire process. So who can use design thinking? Trick question. Anyone, everyone, any industry, any line of business. It's non-denominational. It accepts everybody, as long as you have the right use case for it, which sometimes we may not, but that's in the first session, so check it out if you haven't already. So these are some examples of different organizations that use design thinking or actually have incorporated design thinking as part of their culture. Okay, so with that, that's the end of my recap from the first session so that everybody at least knows why you're here and what design thinking is. So now we're going to start with what today's session is about. And it is a use case for design thinking at General Motors that both Tiffany and I led a couple of years ago. And so I'm going to walk you through step by step what we did so that you can truly see how design thinking can be applied, especially in the learning and development space, which is where we work. So first of all, General Motors has their internal organizations, like every organization. You have IT, HR, all of those. We work for a bit of a separate organization called the Center of Learning. The Center of Learning focuses on educating the dealers across the country. The dealers are a franchisee model, so they're not GM employees. So we have about 4,500 dealerships across the US, and we have about 150,000 retail employees. So that's what we're responsible for, is training, developing them. Predominantly, it's a lot of product-based. We have to teach them about the vehicles, but then it's also power skills like selling, soft skills, things like that. So we're responsible for all of that. I joined the team about 4 years ago. And when I first joined them, one of the questions that I had asked was, how are we doing as a learning organization? And that's a question that we should all be asking, and hopefully we all are asking. And I got the typical response: we're doing great. Our level 1 surveys, everybody loves them. Our product trainers, everybody loves them. The feedback is great. Okay, great. What we're looking at, the data that we're looking at says that we're doing good. But here's the next question that we should all be asking. Could we be even better? It is a continuous improvement question. It's a question that every learning organization should be asking, that we should always be asking, so that we are constantly evolving to meet the needs of our learners. The truth is, what we do in L&D, it's not a destination. We're not going to get to a point where we one day say, okay, learning's done. Now we can go back to our whatever real work. Learning is continuous. It's evolving. Our learners evolve. Businesses evolve. Technology evolves. Challenges, they're evolving. And so we have to continuously be evolving. And the way that we do that is by asking, could we be better? Now, when we first ask this question, and often when I ask the question, there's a little bit of trepidation from the client. Well, are you saying that we're not good? No. What we're asking is, could we be even better? Is there something more that our learners need that we don't know about? And then the next response is usually, well, we run the surveys, we check the level 1 evaluations and they didn't tell us anything. Did we ask the questions the right way? Are we even exploring that? Or are we only focused myopically on the session that they just completed? So it's very plausible that that session was absolutely fantastic and they loved the trainer, but there could be this whole other area that they really need support on. And that's what we often miss. And so again, we should be asking ourselves, could we be better? So we asked that question, and it did take a little bit of coaching to get the team to understand that this is not critical, that this is looking for continuous improvement opportunities. And the way that we positioned it was, it's a win-win situation. Look, worst case scenario, if we explore with our learners and we validate that everything that we believe to be true is true, then that's a win. Best case scenario, if we go out and we learn from our learners that there are other gaps that they need that we can help them with, that's also a win, because that's continued performance improvement, continued performance support. They're going to be able to do better at their job and sell more vehicles, which at the end of the day, that's what our team is really here for. Everyone at GM is to make sure that we have the best operations so that we're selling the most vehicles that we possibly can. So the team eventually did catch on. They agreed, okay, let's go ahead and proceed with this idea of exploring, could we be even better? And that's how our initiative started. So design thinking is not always about product. It's not always about processes. For me, the space that I love exploring it from is continuous improvement, which is why I say anyone can use it, because I think we can always be better. We should always be striving to be better. So the answer was, let's try it. Let's figure this out. So Tiffany and I, and we had one other person, we were the experienced design thinking practitioners, and we started with a team of 10. So we had 3 experienced and 7 inexperienced people. And to be honest, even our experience level was not that strong. So I share that to tell you that you don't always have to have these fantastically experienced and educated individuals who've been doing this for years. It's an opportunity for you to grow and learn together with your team, because there are enough guiding principles, best practices, and tools that design thinking gives you that you can actually go through this with just a little bit of knowledge and putting in the application that you need to get that experience. So we kicked off our session with 10 people. And what we wanted to look at was exploring the lens of the learner experience. Is there something that we need to improve from the learner experience? Is there something more that they need? So the next part I'm going to share with you, I have attended training at MIT, at Stanford's D School, and at IDEO. And none of those places ever talked about the planning before you begin your design thinking initiative. So I want to make sure that I cover this, because this was one of the biggest lessons learned for us, that the planning takes a significant amount of time. So for us, it started with the 5 whys. Who, what, where, when, and why. Pretty simple to remember. So we started first with the who. Who are the people? Who are, first of all, the people on your team? So for us, it was 10 people that we wanted to have, a wide mix of people so that we could learn and grow together. So we had our team defined. Then we need to define who are the users, who are the people that we're going to go out and understand and learn about. And for us, that was the dealerships. And so we identified specific roles in the dealerships that we wanted to target. We had 5 roles, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. So once you identify the roles, now you have to identify who are the actual right people for us to go talk to. we're not just going to randomly pick people and go out because we could be biased in who we're picking and the locations where they are. So there's a bit of a methodological approach. And for us, we used data. So we wanted to find people, dealerships, who had a wide range of technology. So we wanted people who were using the LMS. We wanted new hires, so people who had been hired in less than 6 months. We wanted veterans who had been there for over, I think, 10 or 15 years was our cutoff point. We wanted dealerships that had high sales. We wanted dealerships that had low sales. So that way we got a big variety of a group to be working with so that we got the best amount, the richest amount of data. So you have to identify who are those right people. So once we ran all of the reports to figure out the right dealerships that met all of these criteria, this is the most important thing that we could have done. We spoke to their leadership first. Big best practice. Don't just go out and start randomly having empathy research interviews with people, because when their manager sees you or finds out, they'll either join the conversation, which is going to limit the amount of data you're getting, or they're going to get a little bit upset. Who are you? Why are you talking to my people? Where did you come from? Why don't I know about this? So the best support that you can do for success is to get leadership buy-in. You need your leadership support, but you also need the leadership support of the people that you're going to be interviewing. At minimum, just letting them know who you are, where you're from, the purpose of this discussion. And what was interesting is when we started first talking to the leaders, I would call up and I'd say, hey, this is Keith Keating. I'm calling from GM Corporate. I want to come and talk to your people. Why? Why do you want, you're from corporate. Why are you talking to my people? What happened? Is there something that we did? So quickly we learned that we needed to reframe that approach. And the intention of what the initiative was to help people sell more vehicles. So for us, to call a dealership and say, hey, my name's Keith, I'm with the Center of Learning. I want to help your people sell more vehicles. Can I talk to this person and this person just to understand what they might need from us? We got a lot more buy-in and a lot more support with that approach rather than the little more cold, drastic corporate approach. So again, just a couple of best practices there. So at this point, we know the who. So now the what. What do we want? Well, why are we doing this initiative? What is it that we're trying to learn? So for us, we wanted to learn what motivates people to learn. So if we can figure out their motivation, we can help tap into that motivation so that they're inspired to learn more. We wanted to know, do they even want to learn? Because not everybody might, and we might be trying to push learning objectives, learning initiatives that might be important to us that the learners just don't care about. Are they tech savvy? What type of tech do they use? Because we were so focused on technology, thinking that technology was going to solve all of our learning problems, that we had to take a step back and figure out, do our learners even like technology or use technology? And then we had to figure out what gets in the way of their learning. Why aren't they taking more learning if they aren't? What's stopping them? So these were kind of the overall approaches, ideas that we had in our mind with the what. What are we doing and why? And then the where, of course, where are your users? And so we had to identify them. We identified them based on the data research, and I'll show you those locations in a few minutes. And then, of course, the when, obviously. When are we going to do this? Setting our time period. Design thinking initiatives should be short and quick, not long. On average, I would say that the longest you really want your initiative to be is 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, because in certain situations, if it's taking longer than that, your learners, your users might go out and try to solve the problem themselves. I've had business partners that we've taken so long to come up with a solution, but by the time we went back, they said, we found another vendor. We outsourced this because you were taking too long, or the problem could evolve. And so these are short and quick for us. And then the why. Why are we doing this? We wanted to improve the learner experience. We want to just understand our learners. And that's one of the most important things that we can do from a learning and development perspective is understand who we're solving for, who we're trying to help. We also wanted to identify champions. And so it was a little bit of in the back of our mind that, going out and having this empathy research, it gives us the opportunity to connect with people. And maybe once we make that connection, we could stay connected with them, and then they could actually be champions of our future initiatives so that we've got a quick contact to what's happening out in the field in our learner population. And the last was, of course, continuous improvement, always striving to be better. So that was the planning phase. So I know we start with 5 phases, empathy through tests, but really you need to start first with planning before you even go out to the empathy phase. because the empathy phase is the most important and also the most time-consuming from a planning perspective. And so this is where we learn about our audience. A quick recap, empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing. It gives us the opportunity to uncover the voice of them, whether it's our customer, our learner, our patient, our employee, and it helps to remove our own bias, because we have bias. If you have a brain, you have bias. In fact, a little plug, I just did 2 podcasts on bias in design thinking. I will have the QR code at the end of the session for the podcast series, but definitely check that out, because bias exists in every phase of design thinking. And we've got to be conscious of it to acknowledge it and figure out how to work around it. So in design thinking, we have 3 approaches to how we conduct empathy. The first is trying it, putting the hat on, experiencing it yourself. This is typical for product design and development. Get in there, you play with the product yourself so that you are the user. Then you have looking and observing, being a fly on the wall, an obtrusive experience, and just watching what happens. How do people interact? Why are customers going here, or why aren't they going there? For us, this was important because it was interesting to just go into the dealership and watch the culture in different dealerships. And we learned so much by doing that. For example, the high-performing dealerships, they tend to meet for a huddle every morning. There's a much bigger camaraderie. They were definitely working together and helping each other. The dealerships that had high turnover and lower profit, when I walked in, there was no one to greet me. The phones are ringing off the hook. There was negative signage posted around, like coffee is for closers, and just all of these really microaggression behaviors. And then the last is asking and engaging, having a discussion with them. We tend to call this empathy interviews, but I'm not a big fan of the word interview. Really, it should be a discussion and engagement. Your job is to learn about them. So those are the 3 approaches. So for us, again, it's prepping before you talk with them. So I want to share with you some best practices. So the first thing that we did after we had all the planning was we made sure that everybody had a high-level overview of design thinking. So they all went through a 2-hour crash course on what is design thinking. So that way we all had the same vocabulary. Then we literally got into a room and we started preparing for the empathy interviews. The first thing that we did was we brainstormed the questions. What do we want to learn? What are we going to go out and ask them? And it's so important to do this because we had significantly biased questions. A couple of people were focused only on their job. So one of the individuals was from the technology area, and so she was only interested in the LMS. So her questions were things like, do you like the LMS? What's great about the LMS? What was the last thing that you used on the LMS that you remember? Those are all leading questions. And had we just gone down the path of focusing on the LMS, we would have limited a whole host of other information. And so we brainstorm our questions. Then we get together, we get rid of the bias questions, we get rid of the yes/no questions. We start to identify themes, because you want a logical flow of how you're asking a question. You don't want it to go all over the place. And then we refine the questions. And then this is the best thing that we could have done. So first of all, we created an interview protocol. So that way everybody had the same approach to how they were going to conduct the empathy research interviews. You want to have the same story. You want to be starting with the same questions so that our data is not completely skewed with all these random other questions. Now, your unpacking questions will take you in other directions, but the initial framework should be consistent as much as possible for all the interviewers. The next thing we did, and I don't hear enough about this, is we practiced this. We each printed this out, we broke up in pairs, and we went out to random places in the building and just conducted this interview with random strangers. And it's so important to do that because it gets you comfortable and familiar with the interview, with the what did I call this? The interview protocol, so that these become your words rather than you just reading and acting like it's a 2020 or a police style interview. You want to be comfortable with this because if you're not comfortable, the person you're interviewing is not going to be comfortable. And this honestly was one of the most challenging pieces because there's a bit of stage fright, you're nervous, but those are all the right things to feel, but not in front of the person you're trying to actually conduct the empathy interview with. So that's why you want to practice it beforehand so you get comfortable. We also learned a lot about the questions. Because when we were doing this with random people, some of the questions didn't lead anywhere. And so it helped us figure out, okay, that question actually is not a good question. We need to reword it. So we were able to continue to rework our questions. And I emphasize again, this is so important because if you have bad questions, if you have uncomfortable questions, if you're uncomfortable, you're not going to get good data. And if you don't get good data, you might as well stop the initiative because nothing else that you're going to do is going to be representative of your learners because everything is based off of the empathy research. And a quick caveat, all this can be done remotely. It is a little bit more challenging, obviously, but it can be done. There are tools like Miro, I think it's M-I-R-O, and another one that starts with an M that I love, and I clearly can't remember, but we'll figure it out. If Tiffany knows, she can put it in chat. So we went out prepared for the interviews, and then now we're actually ready. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the way that we set it up. So it's important to make sure that you are getting a wide representation from your group. And so for us, it was the entire US. So we needed to make sure that we hit all of our regions so that we weren't biased with just the West Coast region or the East Coast region. So we went to 5 regions. We broke up into pairs. So the first week is really preparation, practicing the empathy questions, brainstorming them, getting comfortable. That took about a week. The next week, we broke up into pairs and we traveled out to these locations. And our goal was to interview 75 people and 5 different roles. And so all that had already been defined. We had everything planned, scheduled out. Everybody knew we were coming. And on the right, you'll see the 5 roles that we focused on. So we flew out on a Monday. We interviewed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we flew back on Friday. So that was a week that we did for interviewing. In terms of what you're doing while you're interviewing, there's a couple of different approaches. If possible, always record the interviews. It makes the transcription so much easier as long as you get their approval first and as long as you destroy the recording afterwards, because the intention is just to get that transcription to save your wrist if you're writing or your fingers if you're typing. These are actual notes from our interviews. The other best practice is to have a second person be your note taker. You cannot have a strong empathy research discussion while you're trying to take down the notes and actively listen to them because you're too busy trying to type or write and your brain can't keep up and then you're going to lose track and you're not having the eye connection. So have a second person so that they can take notes or record so that you can transcribe it a little bit later. We also use a tool called a 4-box. So I talked about this in part 1. So a 4-box is what we wrote down ourselves after each of the interviews. So that these are really our thoughts on what we heard, what we think we might have heard through them. And so we used who am I, like what represents them, what are their motivations and goals, what are their learning friction points, and what are some of their key quotes. Quotes are the most important thing that you can have in any empathy research. If you're pulling forward quotes, especially consistent quotes from your learners, that is so much more valuable than I said, you said, we said. It's the actual learner. You'll find that it's a little bit challenging to argue against what the learner is saying. It might be easier to argue with what Keith says or what Tiffany says, but when it's coming from the learner who we're trying to solve for and help, we can't really argue against their reality, their perception of that reality. So we have these 4 boxes after all of our interviews. And the logical flow for these is we then migrated, we kind of consolidated all of these and we turned them into learner personas. And so again, we talked about this as a tool last time. Learner persona is a high level, kind of an aggregate overview of each role of who you've interviewed. Not each individual person, but the role, an aggregate, kind of a general idea. And the reason for this, there's a number of reasons, but we had 10 people going out and interviewing. We all might have come back with a little bit of a different perspective of those roles. But by putting all of our information together, we have a picture of what that role represents for each user. The great thing about these learner personas or user personas in general is that they can be organic and they can continue to live on. We still are using these learner personas now. We'll have either new business partners at GM or maybe new people that we've brought on board, and they'll say, hey, what are the sales consultants like? What are the BDC personnel like? And we can just give them that learner persona so they can get a glimpse into what that role is or what's representative of that role. So then we had our learner personas. So I want to stop because I've been talking a bit about empathy research, and I know some people here have done this before, and maybe you've got some best practices that you want to share. So I want to open it up and just hear maybe from a couple of people. Feel free to share it in chat or raise your hand if you'd like. And let me know, what type of best practice do you have for empathy research that I might not have talked about just now that you want to share, because I want to learn from you as well. Tiffany, anybody brave enough to raise their hand?
I have not, excuse me, I have not seen anyone's hand go up just yet. No, I don't see anything in chat. Maybe
How
someone's
about in the
writing
chat?
us something interesting. Oh,
It does take a
do
little
I
time,
see
and it gives me time to have
anything?
water.
Oh, nice.
Share with the class.
Everyone's pretty quiet today.
All right, so I'm going to keep going, but if you have any best practices you want to share or
Oh.
add, please feel free to put them into chat. What do you have there?
Keith, we have a best practice from Elizabeth, who says that she's worked with her research team to validate questions and the focus group process. And Raymond says he's learned that
Absolutely.
a
Get
best
a second opinion. Go ahead.
Raymond also says to be accepting, no judging when listening.
Absolutely. Active listening. You are not there to judge, and you're not there to validate. You are truly there to listen and absorb what they're saying, because it is their reality, it's their perspective. And another best practice, don't contradict them and don't correct them. This is really hard. I'll share with you personally that when you're listening to these people, for us, talk about our group, the Center of Learning, and speak negatively maybe about the LMS or negatively about this program, I want to jump in and defend it, and I want to explain why. Like, here's why we did that, or here's what you need to do to fix that. And that's not our job. Our job is just to listen, ask more questions, get as much data as we can. So it is hard to sit there and listen to that and not want to engage more with that. All right, let me keep going on. So that concluded our empathy phase. So we flew back on Friday, we all combined our notes, we did our 4 boxes, we started to merge those together. And then on Monday, we met again in the room, and we started with our define phase. And this is where we define our problem statement. So you're defining a meaningful and actionable problem statement based on what you've just learned. So you're unpacking your empathy findings and needs into insights. You're learning about all this data. Where is this coming from? And what does it mean? What is it saying? And then you take those empathy findings and you turn them into problem statements. And then you also develop a point of view on the user, like I was sharing with the personas. So this is literally what happened. We came into a room and we started brain dumping. We started putting things on Post-it notes. We worked first individually. What were the assumptions that we had? What do we think we need to explore more to understand more? Because, as I said earlier, design thinking is non-linear, meaning that we might have all left with more questions than we got answers. And so you may need to go back and have more conversations with your learners. And so we want to capture, what do we want to learn more about? And then we start grouping things together, and that's what you'll see on the right-hand side. We start looking for, what are some cohesive themes that we're starting to see here? Now, I'm going to share with you, a lot of times in design thinking training, people jump from this. They say, okay, you get together and you put stickies and you brainstorm, and then poof, you've come up with themes. That's not how it works. There's something that a lot of people skip over, and that is qualitative data coding. Now, this is not a qualitative data course, but I do want to share with you that this is kind of that missing piece that people don't necessarily talk about. So I highly recommend explore more about qualitative data coding. I will take a minute and tell you that a lot of what you'll see out there makes it a little bit more complicated than it is. What I'm showing you on the screen right now is literally the way that I was coding my data. And what that means is I'm going through and I'm looking for consistent messages and different themes. And then I was literally just highlighting it and then putting a comment in there. So you'll see all my comments on the right. Like a couple of these was, the theme was their approach to learning. Another theme was motivation. The reality is there's not necessarily a wrong way for qualitative data coding, but there are tools that can help you with this. So one way that I do it, like you see here, is with Word, and I do it in my doctoral program with Word. There's also tools out there like a program called Deduce, D-E-D-O-O-S-E. I think there's a free version out there. The way that Deduce works is you would upload all of your data. So let's say you had 5 Word documents. You upload the 5 Word documents, and then some of it works automatically behind the scenes looking for different themes. Other parts you go through and you actually code it yourself. And this is a complicated word for saying basically highlighting, tagging it. And so what you're seeing here is an actual use case of that I did with the data, just so you could see how a program might work. And so again, this is Deduce. And you can see in the middle nodes. Nodes are themes. And so those are the themes, and then the right-hand column is what is actually tagged as within that theme. So nodes are themes and qualitative data. That's how you get from all those lovely Post-it notes in a room to, poof, what are our themes? It's qualitative data coding. All right, so after we did that, we spent about at least 3 days doing the qualitative data coding. And we actually went outside to get some additional support with that because we really weren't experts in that. And we wanted to make sure that we were doing this correctly. So we had some help with the thematic approach. When that was finished, about 3 days later, we had identified 6 key themes that had emerged. The first was everybody agreed that the product trainers were great. So we validated that, and that was great. However, we also uncovered that there was a significant need, or plural, needs that we had no idea existed. So the first, our learners said, product training is great, you're helping us become product experts, but we need help with communication skills. We need help with sales skills. How do we turn ourselves into a business? Because that's really what we are. We are a business. How do we have cultural training, and how do we listen to our customers? And so there was an immediate, obvious need of what they were telling us, that they need soft skills training, or I'd prefer to call that power skills, because those are power skills. So they needed power skills. And this wasn't something we had been focusing on. We were under the assumption, we, Center of Learning, were under the assumption that the dealers were giving the sales consultants and all their employees the training they need, the soft skills, power skills to sell the vehicles. The dealers were under the assumption that we were giving them this power skills training. So it was a massive, unexposed, unexplored gap that could have huge impact. And it was huge because everyone was saying, we need help, we need help, we need help. So that was the first theme. And that right there made it all worthwhile. The second is they wanted to be inspired. They wanted to be motivated with their learning. And I think as learners, all of us hopefully are lifelong learners, we all want to be motivated and inspired. So that resonated. They wanted the training to be personalized. And we should have known this, but new hire and veterans were taking the exact same training. And the veterans are saying, why do I have to take all of this stuff? I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how to do it. Tell me the short version. Tell me what I need to know so that I can get out there and sell vehicles. And the new hires are saying, I need actually a little bit more because I'm brand new to this. Maybe I'm brand new to the automotive industry. I need some more here. The fourth was they wanted flexibility to learn what they want, but with enough structure to know where they're going. So let me say that a different way. The LMS was a major way that we delivered training, as many learning organizations, unfortunately. And the way that we were executing the training was once a quarter, we would give you these courses. And you might come in on a Tuesday, and all of a sudden you have 12 courses that are due that month. You don't understand necessarily why. You don't understand how they're going to help you be better at your job. Like, what's the value of this? If I take this, what's it going to do for me? It's more of an annoyance because now you've got people saying, hey, don't forget to complete your training. You've got 30 days, or we don't get our extra money for you completing your training. So it has become more of this incentivized test-taking approach. What they're saying is, give us some flexibility and also help us know when we take this, what's the relevancy? Help me understand why this is important. Learners told us, we want more hands-on and interactive learning. Stop with the LMS because it's click, click, click. But let me get out there. Let me get in the vehicles. do something else, create different experiences for us so that we have hands-on, engaging, interactive experiences, which I think we can all agree with is extremely valuable as a learner. And the last was they recognize that learning is important. In theory, I think everybody will say, yeah, of course, learning is important. But they felt that time spent training is time away from selling. So what that means is they don't truly value our training because they don't see if I take this, I sell more vehicles, I make more money. They see it more as a hindrance. So these were our 6 themes. And I want to share something with you that I don't hear a lot about, and this is important to understand. When you uncover a theme in design thinking, it does not mean that you have to continue the design thinking process if you already know what the solution is. So, number 1, the first one on there, they needed power skills. Well, I don't need to ideate, I don't need to prototype, and I don't need to test. I need to go out there and get them the power skills training that they need. So we took that out of design thinking. It immediately became its own initiative. It took a life of its own. It's called Sales Professional Series, and it's been fantastic. The team has done a phenomenal job with that. But we didn't have to continue with the process and the methodology because we already know what the solution is. So I share that to say just because you've uncovered a theme doesn't mean you need to continue with design thinking to figure out what the solution is if you already know what the right answer or solution is. In this case, it was just executing them, getting that training to them. So we had to take a step back and figure out, okay, we've got 5 themes. What do we do? So honestly, we picked the ones that we thought were most important or that we could have the biggest impact. So there wasn't any scientific methodological approach to picking them. We just kind of decided, hey, these are the 2 we want to go after. So we picked number 5 and 6, hands-on interactive learning, and time spent training is time away from selling. So at this point, we have our problem statements identified. Those themes really are problem statements. But in design thinking, we evolved past a problem statement. We evolved to how might we questions. And I encourage you, as you continue to learn in your journey on being a design thinking practitioner, you don't have to use how might we questions just for design thinking. I use them as much as I can, especially in innovation. If I'm looking to solve a business problem, I turn that problem into a how might we question, and I'll explain why. So how might we questions frame up your approach to ideation. But what it truly means when you say how might we, how suggests that we don't have the answer yet. We don't know what it is, but might says that our responses might be a solution. We're not saying this is the only solution, this is the only approach. And we brings in that collaborative approach. It means that we're gonna work on this together. For example, if I said to you a problem statement like, learners hate the LMS. Okay, it's kind of cold. For me, I don't want to react to that. It feels like it is a statement. And we've made our point, and that is what it is. But let me rephrase it a little bit differently. How might we improve the LMS experience for our learners? So even just a little bit of that emotion behind it versus our learners hate the LMS, how might we improve the LMS for the experience of our learners? For me, I immediately start thinking about what are some different ways? What have I seen in the past? What don't I like about it? How could we improve it? It just feels more actionable and meaningful. So that's why we use how might we questions, but I encourage you, don't limit it to just design thinking. Use it in many different places. So we're actually going to walk through this now in terms of evolving a problem statement to a how might we question. So the first problem statement was, I need to learn from experience so I can apply as I learn. So we spent time figuring out what does that how might we question look like? And we came up with 2. You don't have to just limit yourself with one how might we question. Depends on what lenses, what angles you want to approach this from. So for us, this turned into how might we give learners experiential ways to learn on their own? And the second was, how might we enable people to learn from others on the job? So we think about the problem statement. I need to learn from experience. So I need to be able to go out and do something so then I can apply it as I learn. So often in L&D, we have a bit of a superiority complex where we feel like we're the ones that have to provide the solution. We got to create the content. instead of curating the content, instead of creating opportunities for learners to explore and learn on their own. And so that's what that problem statement was saying to us, is they want to learn from their experience. So how might we give them ways to experience and learn on their own without us having to drive it? And then the other was, how might we enable people to learn from others on the job so that we're curating? So we shouldn't be responsible for creating all of the content. We've got high performers out there. Let's figure out, how do we tap into those high performers? What makes them a high performer? How can we lift and shift that knowledge to people who aren't high performers so that we can help upskill them? So those were our two how might we questions that came out of this problem statement. Now it's going to be your turn. So first, the problem statement was time training is time away from selling. And so we came up with two problem statements. There could be many more. So what we're going to do now is actually go into breakout rooms, and I'm going to have you explore this as a team. So you're going to turn this problem statement into a how might we question. You're going to have 7 minutes in the breakout room. When you go in, unmute yourself, introduce yourself quickly. There'll be 5 people per room. Share your individual response first so that we don't have groupthink, so that everybody gets an opportunity to think about this and share their response. And then you're going to agree on one response. And then we're going to call you back at the end of 7 minutes, and you're going to pick a spokesperson. The spokespeople will raise their hand. Tiffany will call on you, and then you're going to share your how might we question that you've turned into from this problem statement. So again, 7 minutes, unmute, introduce yourself, share your response, agree on one that you want to bring forward as a team, and then pick a spokesperson. We'll call you back, and you'll share those individually. Tiffany, are you ready?
I surely am. And away you go.
Perfect. And make sure there should be a pop-up that is going to send you to a room. So make sure you click on that. Looks like some people haven't yet.
Don't be shy. Friends are made. Networking happens at these times. Enjoy.
Lifelong friendships.
Absolutely. I made a lot of
Ray,
friends
you have
last
not
time.
clicked it. Ray,
Keith's calling you
get
up
in
by
your breakout
name.
room. I know Ray, so I'm going to send him a message right now. Get in your breakout room.
Personalization and learning.
Mm-hmm. Get in your breakout room, young man.
Feedback is a gift. Oh, it worked.
Janet. They've either stepped away or I put them to sleep.
I'm sure they're not asleep. I'm sure they just stepped away for a minute.
Janet.
Do you know Janet as well?
No, but.
Oh, okay. She knows you now.
How's the chat going?
Chat's going just fine. Folks are a little quieter today. Had a couple
A little bit
questions.
more storytelling today.
Yeah. There were a couple questions about how to access the recording and whether you'd be sharing your slides. And I said you had some resources to share, but not necessarily the slides.
Zizo, maybe message him and ask him to put the link to the recording for the last 2 sessions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where those are, but they should be easily accessible for him.
Yeah, they're in the members section. A couple people were saying they had difficulty finding them. It looked as if Marcella's answer was that they are in the members only section. People were asking me if there's any way around that, and I said I didn't believe so.
That's unfortunate because I want to link for myself and I'm not a member. So, in private message, Zizo, I guess I could do it myself.
Let's see, participants.
Oh,
Oh, you know what? I can either message everyone or no one.
Right. And I can't message him because he's in the breakout room.
Right.
Okay.
He is making lifelong friendships. I saw my writing a couple times. That was a blast from the past.
Your
From the session. That 4-box you showed. I'm like, hey, that's my writing. And then one of the notes, it was like really sloppy scrawl. Like, that one looks terrible.
That's funny.
You got to scribble fast in those meetings.
These things always take longer. Gotta cut something.
No, there's just so much to discuss. Oh, this is getting caught again. I like that story.
Yeah, I know.
That's a nice story.
All right. If we have time, I'll move it.
It's a good, it's a nice illustration. It's an easy user to feel empathy for. We have a couple of minutes. I'm going to step away for 1 minute. I will be right back.
Okay.
Nice Gmail.
We still have a 5-minute break too.
Oh, are we going to honor that this time?
I don't know.
Oh. When you said it, I was thinking, I wonder if we're going to have time for it. Maybe don't admit we have one.
I mean, is like 2 minutes okay, or?
Enough for a stretch or grabbing a snack, I guess. Trying to think what I could eat in 2 minutes that I have in the kitchen.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, you could be off of mute and just take your computer with you and eat while I'm talking.
That feels disrespectful, Keith, to the ideas being shared here and the kind of intellectual exchange that I could be enjoying without chewing. I can wait. I'll be fine. I had a big breakfast just in anticipation of this.
If it makes you feel better, my lunch is right here too.
What are you eating?
Beyond Meat burgers and veggies.
Oh, I have some Impossible. I like fake meat.
Mm-hmm.
Tasty. I think it's time to bring them back.
Is it?
Yeah. I didn't see the time limit
Countdown?
this time. Yeah, I didn't see the time limit, so I think we've, yeah. So they're coming back. Yay! They're coming back.
Okay.
Everyone's
An
coming
hour later.
back. Welcome back, everyone. Friendships for life are now
I only
formed.
see,
They're
are
starting to
people
join.
coming back.
Yeah, it'll send a note
Okay.
and it'll say, click to join. Welcome back.
So we probably have time, Tiffany, for 3. Maybe let's do put it in chat.
Okay.
I'll do it.
All right, folks. Looking for people to share their experiences. We have time for about 3, Kate says. Anyone want to volunteer or be voluntold?
Which, if you're a spokesperson, go ahead and click on the hand raise so we know who to ask. So
Oh,
in the
I
essence of
see
time, what I would
Raymond.
ask is if a couple, good. So go ahead for majority of you, if you'll go ahead and type in your how might we questions in the chat, and then we'll have a couple people talk about them out loud. But Ray, if you want to share yours.
Sure, Keith. So we came up with a pretty simple and direct linkage because to think about if people are thinking that, oh, you're taking me away from my selling time, therefore I don't like training. Well, the problem is then how do we link the training effectiveness to the sales figures? So how might we link our training to increased sales figures or increased performance? Just simple one like that.
Nice. Nice.
I can type that out.
It's a good one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Looks like Lori was saying, how do we offer learning experiences while selling? Absolutely. Putting learning in their flow of work.
I see a hand up from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, what would you like to share?
Yeah. So our team, kind of along the same lines, said, how might we integrate learning as part of the day-to-day?
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yep, same thing, that moment of need, put it in their flow of work, because for us, we were taking them away from where they work. They work on the sales floor, they work out in the lot, and they were having to leave and go sit at a computer in the back room and take their training on the LMS. So rightfully so, they weren't wrong when they said time training is time away from selling, because they literally couldn't do their job. Excellent. Anybody else want to share?
I see a hand up from Zaylene.
Yeah, so our group, sort of on the same track with the financial aspect from a seller's mindset, we're looking at how might we drive home the ROI from training while emphasizing skills and new skills needed as part of that process.
Oh, nice. Nice. There's a lot in that one.
Absolutely. Now, so we were thinking the same thing. What I would encourage is we tend to use the phrase ROI, and for us it makes sense. But for our learners, we had to change that a little bit because they don't see it as return on investment. What they see it as is learning that if I take this, I'm going to do my job better, I'm going to sell more vehicles, and therefore I'm going to make more money. So that is ROI, but said in a little bit of a different terminology. But all these are great and are exactly where we were thinking. So turning problem statements into how might we questions, sometimes people find challenging, and clearly you guys didn't, or at least you worked through it. So congratulations with that. And I encourage you to continue on thinking about how might we questions in your day-to-day work. So for us, we turned time training as time away from selling into how might we change the perception of what training means, which goes along the lines of what you're talking about with ROI, because the perception for them is there's no value. So how do we, Tiffany, that might be you, if you can go on mute, or someone, make Tiffany, if you can put everybody on mute, please.
I will mute everyone.
Thank you. How might we change the perception of what training means? And then how might we provide training that doesn't take them away from their job? Just like you're saying, how might we put it into their flow of work where they are in that moment of need? Absolutely. So congratulations with that. So we're going to stop and we're going to take a 4-minute break. I know I said 5 here, but I'm already running a little bit behind. So we're going to come back in. Let me just change the timer. Can I change it? Oh, fine, we'll take 5 minutes. Wait, no, I can change it here. There, okay. All right, we'll take a quick 4-minute break, come back, and we'll continue on. I want to give you an opportunity to stretch, get water. Don't close out of the session. It's weird, this little timer won't work in slideshow mode. Are you there, Tiffany? Am I just talking to myself?
Looks like Tiffany took a break.
Didn't mean her. So I sent you an email. Is it possible to find the Zoom link of the recorded session and put it into the chat? Because some people don't have member access, and it was open to everybody.
Right.
Let me see if I can try. Of the previous recorded session?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, we've got the countdown at 15 seconds. Tiffany, are you back? All right, we're going to continue on. So welcome back from the break. So we've talked about empathy, define. Now we're going to move into the Ideate phase. And the Ideate phase is, of course, where we come up with the broadest range of possibilities, not the right idea, but the broadest range of possibilities. So for us, and I shared this last time, this was an opportunity where we bring in outside people into our ideation process. And I don't hear enough about that, so I'm recommending that again. As I mentioned, we had 10 people initially. We brought in 8 more people to help with the ideation process. They had no context to what this is. They don't need design thinking training to ideate. They don't need to know about everything that we did and whatever's going on. All they need is the how might we question. So even right now, if I were to give you this question, how might we change the perception of what training means? You could start to ideate on that right now. You don't need to know what the client is, what the situation is. You're just coming up with ideas. The same, how might we give learners the experience to learn from others? You don't need to know the situation. You can start ideating. So we really didn't give these 8 new people much context. We included some trainers. We included actual customers. We included sales consultants. We included people that weren't part of the Center of Learning. And the reason for that is you want outside thinkers. You want people that don't have all that historical context, don't have all that bias, don't have the experience of budgets being denied and resources being cut and ideas being tried and maybe not working. They're the ones I find that typically come up with the best ideas because this is all new to them. So they don't have those constraints. And so they're just blue sky and coming up with these really cool ideas that we can then build upon. So bring in new people. So for us, we had 18 people at this point. We're literally all in a room. We have 4 walls. On each wall, we put the how might we question, one single how might we question. And we started first with asking everybody to brain dump, use Post-it notes, individually come up with ideas for each of these, and then they start just putting them around the room. So I'll share with you our ideation process, the 4-step process. We idea share or brain dump, we sketch and storyboard, then we vote, and then we plot it against an impact and feasibility matrix. So we started first with the idea share, literally kind of brain dumping individually. Then we broke up into groups. And so people got to pick, I think everybody picked kind of which how might we question they wanted to focus on. So we had 4 overall teams, if you will, 1 team working on each how might we question. So we had our initial ideas on all the Post-it notes that everybody contributed. Then the teams started to group them because there's always going to be some consistent themes and some outliers of ideas. So we grouped those, and then we picked the ideas that we liked. Again, no scientific methodology here, but what sounded most appealing to us, what were we most interested in, and then we sketched out those ideas. And that's actually what you're seeing here, are those individual ideas, stories sketched out so that we could illustrate what it is that we're thinking could be the solution here. So after we sketched it out, we storyboarded, then each group presented it. So group 1 would come up in front of everybody else and they would say, hey, this is blah, 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 here's our how might we question, and here's what we think the solution could be. Again, it's a could, not what it is. And so kind of walk everybody through it, and then people get to vote. And they vote on what's doable, what's a wild card, and what's disruptive. Doable, self-explanatory, means this is something that we could actually do. Wild card means we don't know if we can actually do this, but it's really interesting. Let's explore that further. And then disruptive just means that it's different than the current business model. It doesn't mean that it's negative or that it's positive. It just means it's different. It's going to disrupt the way that we're currently doing our work, because it's important to notate that. So once all 4 groups presented back, all the voting was completed. We tallied up the voting, which you see on the right-hand side. So Y is yellow, B for blue, G for green. And then we plotted it against the prioritization matrix. And we use what's called an impact and feasibility matrix. And we break it up into 4 quadrants. Big bets, those are your high risk, high rewards. Lower priority means these are things that we like, but we're not going to really focus on them right now. Quick hits, those are important because those are things that we could probably do in the next week or so that might have a little bit of impact, but at least our learners will feel that we're hearing them and that we are trying to do something to make it better for them. And then we have our stars. We call those our risk-reward sweet spot. So we plot them based on impact and feasibility. And literally, that's just us looking at the ideas and thinking, is this even possible? Is this going to take too much money, too many resources? What's the likelihood that this could actually happen? So again, no scientific approach here, literally just all of us kind of voting about where we think that these would fall on this matrix. And what we identified was 3 areas in the stars, and that's what we wanted to focus on. Again, that risk-reward sweet spot. So mobile Molly, video events, and sell like we do. These were the 3 ideas that we wanted to take forward. So now our ideation phase is complete. We've got our ideas, and now we're ready to move on to the prototype phase, where we build out 1 or more representations. So in design thinking, you have 2 types of prototypes, low fidelity, not just design thinking, but prototypes. You have either low fidelity or high fidelity. Low fidelity is quick, cheap, or free. No red tape. You don't need to get a lot of permissions or approvals. You're literally just trying something, maybe building it with clay, maybe drawing it, maybe acting it out with charades, maybe using a vendor or a partner who's going to give you something to try out and test. High fidelity tends to be longer. There is money usually involved, resources involved, red tape, permission, approval, all these complicated factors. So we try to always avoid high fidelity and focus on low fidelity, quick, cheap, easy, minimum viable product, which is what we talked about in the first session. So that's what we're looking for here. Just giving our users something to try to give us feedback, to tell us if we're on the right path. So I'm going to tell you first what the how might we question was, and then we'll talk about the idea that we had. So this how might we question that we were addressing was how might we give learners experiential ways to learn on their own? So the most obvious idea that we kind of all had was, well, we have high performers. How do we create an environment where we can connect everyone together, including high performers, including veterans, including new hires, so that they can learn from each other from a social standpoint, so that we can kind of take a step back and let some organic growth and learning opportunities happen. So if I were to ask you right now, what's the most obvious social platform that we could use for free, you'd probably say Facebook, which is what we said as well. Free. We could set it up in 24 hours. We turned on the privacy function so that we could only access it by invite, and that way we could create our own group of who we wanted to prototype in this area. So we had our first prototype, 24 hours, didn't cost us a dime, didn't have to get permission from anybody because it wasn't public. It was just a small test that we were going to try. And I'm going to talk more about that in the test phase in a few minutes. So prototype idea number 1, done, $0. Number 2, how might we provide learning that doesn't take them away from their jobs? So again, we want to get them out of that back room. We want that just-in-time performance support in that moment of need. Well, everybody, most everybody, has a smartphone, mobile device. So we thought, what can we do to engage learning opportunities there? And is there a way that we could not only push content to them when we felt it was necessary, like maybe there was a new vehicle that came out, or a mid-year enhancement cycle, or something happened and we need to get them that content. But is there also a way that they could pull the content when they need it? Not just us giving it to them, but them going out and grabbing it. So that push-pull effect. We had, some people had experience with a chatbot. And so we thought, well, what about using a chatbot for learning and development? Is that an option? Luckily, we had a partner within our organization who is a chatbot provider. And we reached out to them and we said, we'd like to run a prototype with 100 people. We don't have a budget right now, but if this is successful, then there's opportunities for you to continue your service with a massive organization like General Motors. Will you work with us? And they said yes. So we had to lay out what our initiative was, what the campaign was that we wanted to test, and different criteria we focused on. You know, how often do we want to have them get messages? What's the engagement like? How do we do pre and post knowledge assessments so we can actually measure if this is valuable besides just how many users use it. Does knowledge retention work with a chatbot? So these are all the questions that we were thinking about. But the moral of the story is we had somebody who's going to help us for $0. So second prototype now, $0. So our third was video events. How might we enable people to learn from others on the job? Again, we want to enable this social capacity. We've got product trainers. Product trainers are our most expensive asset. So how can we create an environment where product trainers are available to anyone in the world so that we're able to share this wealth of information to make sure everybody has access and is learning and growing? And the obvious solution was, well, what about virtual feedback and coaching tools? So the first idea that people had was FaceTime. Well, that works if you have an iPhone. So then we explored, is there an app that works like this? And the team first thought, well, maybe we just design it. And luckily, we found a provider that does do this type of service. And so we had the same conversation with them. Hey, we'd like to partner with you. We don't have any money right now, but if this is successful, it could lead to a long-term contract with a huge organization. Would you work with us for a couple of weeks and give us 100 licenses? They said yes. So we now have our third prototype, $0. I will put in a little asterisk here. It is very rare that you're going to be able to have these type of prototypes at zero cost. So I'm just throwing that caveat out there. We had the opportunity because different parts of our organization, GP Strategies, were already working with these providers. And I'll just share with you, but before I do, I'm agnostic from providers. It just happened to be that for the chatbot, it was Mobile Coach. And for the video virtual feedback and coaching tool, it was Practice. And so now we have our three prototypes that we're ready to move forward with at this point. And so now, of course, we move into the testing phase. So then we got our users back engaged, and we started testing. So in testing, we're looking to create authentic experiences for our users, that real world, so that it's not this fake alternative reality where they're testing it, but that's not how it would work in their real environment. It needs to be as real as possible. Then as you're going through the test phase, you're going to be refining your prototypes and your solutions because you're going to be getting that feedback from them about what works and what doesn't work. And you're going to be able to refine your point of view. One best practice I'll share with you, and this was a personal challenge I had, is I recommend that you bring in different people for the testing phase than the group that might have been leading this whole initiative, or maybe you partner with new people. For me, I got emotionally attached to some of these ideas. I really wanted them to work, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But that's a form of bias, because I found that I was almost leading and coaching the learners. You know, oh, you're not using it right. Here's how you use it correctly. Here's how you could use it. And I'm really trying to sell it to them indirectly. And so that's something that we absolutely have to be careful of. Our job is not to sell any idea. The idea either works to meet their needs or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that's okay. We refine it and we keep going until we find the right one. We're not trying to sell an idea. That's what makes design thinking iterative. So we started with Sell Like We Do. That was the social component. Of course, we had Facebook. We brought in, I think, 500 people to start with, and it was slow. It was slow to take off. It took probably, we piloted it, prototyped it for about 2 months, pretty low engagement scores at that point. So we started to open up a little bit more. Like maybe we don't have the right type of people in there, so let's add a few more people. Then it started to really take off. And over, this is about 3 years now, we now have 2,500 users total. All of the brands at GM have their own private Sell Like We Do Facebook page. And we've had a lot of success with this, and more success than I think we probably expected. We thought that we would have a lot of concerns with maybe people being negative and things like that. But we have a moderator who moderates this, and they look for these types of activities. And we've only had to remove 3 people from the group in 3 years. So that's pretty phenomenal. We've had people share that they've sold vehicles based on the relationships, based on the knowledge that has been procured in the Facebook group. I'm still a member. We were not active. Like when a learner would ask a question, we didn't jump in and solve that. We wanted it to be organic, so we let other people jump in and help each other out. And it's really a beautiful sight to sit back and see this. On the weekend, sometimes I'll just look in and check, and you'll see someone say, hey, I just started 4 weeks ago. I haven't sold a vehicle. Can somebody please help me? What am I doing wrong? Somebody will jump in and say, hey, here are my 10 best practices. Here's what I do. Here's how you make this video. Here's how you do that. So we're seeing a lot of social collaboration. So moral of the story is this initiative has been successful. It's now a business as usual BAU initiative. It's part of our overall ecosystem. It's part of our sales professional series now. And we have this environment where sales consultants can go to learn from each other, learn with each other. And we just moderate at a very high level from a privacy and security standpoint to make sure no one's doing anything bad, if you will. But other than that, we don't really engage, and it just happens organically. So the next is Mobile Molly. How might we provide learning that doesn't take them away from their job? This was, of course, the chatbot. So we set up 2 different types of initiatives. Here's what we were measuring. How long are people going to engage with a chatbot before they get sick of being bothered by it? And does learning actually happen? Is there sustainment? Can you build new knowledge from a chatbot? So we set up 2 different tracks, 2 different use cases. One use case was longer. So it was 3 texts per week over a 4-week period. And the other one was shorter, texting every day from the chatbot for a 2-week period. So that way we can kind of gauge, they like shorter spurts, but more information up front and then you're done, or do you want it spaced out? And then we did a pre and a post test to see their knowledge on the vehicle before they started versus when they were finished. What we found was 9 chats was really as much as people were really wanting to engage. After 9 chats, people started really dropping off. So we had high engagement for the first 9 days, really. Then our overall NPS score. So we, of course, did survey feedback with the participants that were part of this. We had a 69 Net Promoter Score. So for those of you who aren't familiar, a 50 Net Promoter Score is really good. So a 69 is great. But what we learned was that they like the shorter track, but we mistakenly were messaging them on their days off, and they hated that. We should have thought about that. Empathy, we missed out on that one. But good lesson learned for us. Don't message them on Sundays, which is when the dealerships are closed. So great lesson learned. So the moral of the story is they liked the shorter track, more text up front, shorter time period, stopping at 9, but don't message me after hours and don't message me on my day off. So for us, it was important to understand, did people like it? And the answer was, from the feedback that we got, those who used it did really like it. It was also really important that we had product trainers as champions to get people to participate. This wasn't as simple as us just creating this and then sending an email and poof, everybody was part of it. It took a lot of work and engagement and communication to get people to interact with the chatbot, because with the chatbot, you have to opt in. You have to text to get it. We just can't push it. So you've got to open that door for connectivity. More intense short cycle was preferred, chat during work hours and never on weekends, and chatbots can reinforce and help with knowledge retention, which is what we were able to demonstrate from our pre and our post knowledge assessment. So our third one, video events. How might we enable people to learn from others on the job? So this is the one that my team came up with, and I love this one, and I love the tool. I think, just in general, not just practice, but a virtual feedback and coaching tool can be a very powerful tool. I was really excited about this, and I pushed it and sold it really hard, and it failed miserably. And I share this for a couple of reasons. One, failure is part of design thinking. Just because we have a great idea and we know that it could work, and we know that it is working someplace else, doesn't mean that it's going to work in this environment. And the reality is the culture at the dealerships was not the right type of culture for this. The reason is their mobile phones, their smartphones are their own personal phones. They don't want to be dictated to what they can or cannot download. And in this case, we were asking them to go out, download a new app, create a login, and then be a part of this. And it got to the point where I had webinars with each of the pilot groups, and in the webinar, I'm walking them through this, and they're encouraged, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, this is a great idea. We get off the webinar, not one single person opted in. because they didn't want to download it. It just was too cumbersome for them. They needed either single sign-on or they just didn't want to download anything, period. And the reason that the chatbot worked is there's nothing to download. You just SMS message, you just text message, and you're engaged. So the other moral of the story is we originally had thought, well, let's go out and design an app ourselves. And so this is why prototyping is so important, because if we had spent 6 months and, I don't know, $50,000 designing an app, only to then figure out that it's not part of the culture, it would have looked really bad on us. Instead, we were able to figure out almost immediately at no cost that this is not part of the culture. So the other moral is when you are brainstorming, when you're ideating, you've got to take the culture of the organization into consideration. It's not our job as design thinking practitioners to try and change the culture, because you're going to fail. Culture changes are a much bigger initiative than what we can do. So we do have to take that into consideration. So for us, design thinking was part of our 3-year plan, our 2021 future learning journey. It started first with the voice of the customer, the learners. We then took all that information, we started implementing it, designing initiatives, and it didn't just start with these 3 that you saw here. We continued on with the recognition, with feedback, with personalization, all part of the themes that we heard, and we focused on that strongly in 2019. 2020, we focused more on talent, technology, and process. Of course, COVID hit, changed the way that we were really focusing, everything shifted to virtual, but nonetheless, it was part of our 3-year journey from a learning perspective. So our overall lessons learned: take notes on the experience of the interviews. It's very important that you're capturing everything, not just the conversation, but what happened before, maybe what happened after. Remember, the empathy customer interviews take significant planning. It helps if you have dedicated resources. We didn't, so our initiative took about maybe 4 weeks total, a little bit longer than I'd like. Create a place to continue fostering design thinking so that this is part of a culture shift, a mind shift. It's not just a one-time event. You're planting seeds throughout the organization in terms of the vocabulary, the terminology, the value of it. Avoid yes/no questions. There can lead to bias questions. Make sure you don't have your negative voice. You're not leading your empathy research. Design thinking initiatives are quick. And remember that design thinking is not a solution for every problem. As a learning and development practitioner, our job is to have a toolkit. And in that toolkit, we need to have a lot of different tools to solve different challenges. We wouldn't just build a house with a hammer. The same thing with design thinking. Design thinking is like our hammer. It is one of many tools that we can use. So I just caution you from going back and starting to say, oh, I'm design thinking everything, because I hear that often. And the reality is we shouldn't be design thinking everything, because not everything needs it. Here's 5 quick examples of L&D design thinking applications that you can consider. For us, we did how might we improve the learner experience, which we talked about today. From an HR perspective, how might you attract and retain new talent? How might we be better business partners? How might we improve the employee experience and engagement? And how might we create a culture that empowers creativity, collaboration, and innovation? These are really my top 5 favorite L&D design thinking applications, especially the better business partner. If you're starting a new collaboration or maybe you're starting to support a new business unit, what better way to figure out than how to align your goals, how to align your success measurements, than using design thinking to work together. So as a quick reminder for us, it started with 2 questions. How are we doing? And how could we be better? And those are 2 questions that we should all be asking in everything that we do. So we've only got 1 minute left. I'm going to skip the knowledge check. I know everybody was paying really close attention, and I want to just share with you real quick. I have to skip that too, unfortunately. Tiffany is going to share with you in the chat some design thinking resources, the 2-page document that I've put together. Definitely check it out. Part of your practitioner journey should be understanding success stories and even failure stories of design thinking. It's one of the best tools that you can use to encourage your business units, your business partners, your customers to use design thinking. We don't want to push them and say, hey, you should be design thinking. Okay, why? Well, because it's good. No, we need to have stories behind it. Stories about how General Motors is using design thinking to improve their learner experience culture. Stories about how Airbnb essentially turned itself around from failure by using design thinking to understand what the customers needed. Nike uses design thinking for all of their product design. So there's actually a blog in this resource list that Tiffany is sharing that has 40 success stories of design thinking. So get those in your vocabulary so that in different discussions you can talk about how it's being used throughout multiple industries, not just your own industry. It can be very valuable there. All right, last two things. If you don't already have this, 2 QR codes for you. Ahead of tomorrow is the podcast that I have where I focus on topics that help us prepare for and stay ahead of tomorrow. There's a couple of new podcast episodes that just came out on bias and design thinking, so definitely check those out. There's bias in every phase of design thinking that we have to be cognizant of as design thinking practitioners. A lot of future of work discussions there as well. Also add me on LinkedIn. I'm extremely active there. I'd love to continue the conversation with you in terms of your design thinking journey. What are you doing? What are you having challenges with? What do you have questions on? What feedback do you have for me? Because we're not going to have time to get to that today, but I do want to hear from you in terms of your feedback. And also let's just connect and continue learning together on our design thinking practitioner journey and our journey as learning development practitioners in general. So with that, we're right at the top of the time. I'm happy to stay on. Tiffany, any questions that might have come in that we want to address?
Yes, I just responded to this one. Daniela asked if you had any success stories, Keith, for implementing belonging and inclusion in the culture. And I encouraged her to add you on LinkedIn because I know that you do.
Yes, that's a whole other session. We actually just did 3 webinars on this about creating an anti-racist organizations. So you can check those out on GP Strategy's website. Start there, and then we can connect on LinkedIn and keep that conversation going. Tiffany, any other questions we might want to address quickly before we lose everybody?
I see a question from Shivdas asking, can you share how problem statements were created?
Quick answer to that is the problem statements came out of our themes. So oftentimes the theme that you uncover is actually the problem statement in itself. And so we didn't even have to change our themes because those were the problem statements. So long answer short, your theme will be your problem statement, can be your problem statement. All right, with that, I know we're a few minutes over. So thank you everyone for joining us again. I think we might have put the link to the first session in the chat. Zizo, did we get that in there?
We sure did. It was a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Marcella just said the resources will be posted along with the video recording. Daniela, for the anti-racist, yes. You know what? If you reach out to either myself or Keith on LinkedIn, we would be happy to shoot you that link. Absolutely. It's an important topic. Thank you for asking.
Yes, and don't forget, we have Tiffany's session coming up soon, so please make sure you pay attention to that.
Yes, Tiffany. I can't remember your date. What's your date, Tiffany? Learner experience.
It is September 22nd. I was just thinking that sounded interesting, nice. And then I realized it was mine. Thank you, Zizo.
So hopefully you'll be there.
I'm planning to. It's on the calendar. Hope to see some folks back there. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Keith.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you,
and
bye. Have a great afternoon.
Great session, Keith. Have a good one.
Enjoy.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.